It's a Monday edition of Cards Hub 365, powered by Gray Bar here on Sports Hub STL. I'm Joe Roderick, joined alongside by Brendan Schaeffer. First off day for the Cardinals since they started playing games. No games to talk about today. A few things happened over the weekend, but a lot of the news coming out over the last 24 hours has been from the left-handed side of the mound.
Yeah, so Quinn Mathews going down to minor league camp maybe a little earlier than some folks might have expected. I was included in that group where I saw the news. I thought, okay, maybe a little surprising, but we can talk about the degree to which that makes sense or doesn't make sense for the Cardinals. The Zack Thompson news is obviously not the news that Zack Thompson wanted, given that this was going to be a pretty big spring for him to kind of prove himself again within the organization. But he's got an injury now that's going to basically knock him out from the spring. So kind of how that impacts the pitching depth conversation for the Cardinals is a topic we can certainly get into. I know we're going to talk a little bit about Victor Scott II as he continues his surge toward potentially forcing his way onto this Cardinals opening day roster is something that they'll definitely be talking about in the coming weeks. And so we can get into that conversation and your comments and questions today on Cards Hub 365.
Yeah, the way that they do, I mean, when the Quinn Mathews news, as you mentioned, surprised me. And when we talked with, when I've brought this up with Claibs a few times, he has said, it had to be an absolute disaster for him to be on the roster at the start of the season. It would be a disaster. I can't remember what the word he used was for that. I know it was just, so much would have to go wrong.
If they needed him, that means a lot of other stuff happened that you probably don't want.
And one of those dominoes might have been Zack Thompson being hurt to start the year.
Well,
but again, they made this decision yesterday on Quinn Mathews. Zack Thompson news comes out today.
And we just talked about Zack a little bit Saturday, I think it was.
Yeah.
Where you're like, hey, this is a guy we haven't been talking about at all. And maybe that's part of why.
Apparently there was a reason why when we looked and we saw he had one appearance so far in spring, and really nobody, nobody within the Cardinals, nobody, no baseball insiders, nobody was saying, oh, we're forgetting about him. Apparently maybe they either knew more than we did, or there was just the hype is gone.
I think it was a combination of things on Thompson, whereas we talked about Saturday, he had a bad year last year and then came in with a lot to prove. I also think he kind of had to prove himself to the organization again, where they kind of forgot about him in the pecking order for right or wrong reasons. Like there are other guys that had lapped him, even though he was in that opening day rotation as recently as last year. So having an injury at this point, not what he wanted, because you can't make an impression. You've got an opinion that the team might have of you of, we're kind of disappointed with how last year went. Almost think about how Palante last year was sent down to the minors, and they cared so little about like the trajectory that they're like, yeah, sure, be a starter if you want. Like that's going to work. And then guess what? Andre Palante was like, I'll show you it is going to work. And then the Cardinals had to take notice.
Right.
And they did. And when they had
now he might be the number 3 this year.
He might be their number 2. I mean, in terms of effectiveness, it's between him and Fetty, I think, as you kind of look at how those guys perform. Palante had a lower ERA with the Cardinals as a starter last year than Fetty did. So we'll see. But the point of that is like Thompson needed that sort of spring to sort of vault back into the conversation. Instead, he's got the lat sprain or strain or whichever it is. Grade 1, I believe strain. It's a strain. So that's grade 1 is better than the alternative, but it's also one of those injuries that is really annoying to where they say 3 to 4 weeks, no throw. It could be a lot longer than that.
And that's no throw. Then you have to build it back up. I mean, we're not saying 2 to 3 weeks and then, hey, you can play in a game. Like that's 2 to 3 weeks. Okay. Then you go on then you start seeing how you throw, and then rehab assignment. He
might have been a Memphis guy anyway.
Yeah.
And it also
Memphis might not see him till May.
And it also could get to the point though, Joe, where like, was he one of the top 5 starters to be prioritized for the Memphis rotation before this injury? I don't know.
For his career, you would have to hope that
I'm sure Zack Thompson hopes so, but that's my point. Is like he's in a bit of a precarious.
This is a first-round pick from 2019, right? I mean,
was it as recently as 19? He's 27, so whatever the math tells you on that. So and again, he was in the rotation last year, did enough in spring to earn that opportunity. Some body composition changes coupled with then delivery mechanics that it wasn't repeatable, consistent, kind of got him into a funk last year. Unfortunately, this was going to be his best chance to show, like, here are the areas of growth that I've had. And so that's obviously not going to happen. So we'll put him off on the back burner for now. And in a month, hopefully he's, hey, that strain that I had, it's not so bad. I'm able to kind of get right back out there, and hopefully the Cardinals give him that chance. But on that standpoint, yeah, he was probably, when you talk about Quinn Mathews, Zack Thompson was on the periphery of a conversation, but you still got guys like McGreevy. You've still got guys like Tekoa Roby's still in camp. So as far as
and you're watching that closely.
I'm going to show you, Claibs.
Have you come up with a nickname for his fan club yet? Have you?
No, but I am definitely taking suggestions.
We can workshop that later in the week.
But you got to admit, as much as we joke, like the stuff looks really good from Tekoa Roby, and if he can continue that, he's a guy that has had very few innings as well. But if he's healthy long enough, I don't know that the Cardinals would scoff at the idea of maybe he's in the bullpen. Maybe you want to keep him on the starter track. Okay, send him right to Memphis and he's a step away. Like that's possible for him.
And that's where the Quinn Mathews thing, that's where it gets a little interesting because he was really the first guy sent down. And
Cooper Jerpy is another one that did go down in that same day.
And right now, I mean, Mathews has impressed at every single level last year. There was talk maybe in September last year of him even being called up.
Some people might have talked about it. I don't know that it was
but
likely.
I think going into the season, it was like, okay, maybe he has a chance here. There has to be something that the Cardinals saw that they were like, okay, we're sending you down to Memphis to lengthen you, or we're sending you down to the minor league camp. We want you to work on something else.
I actually disagree with that. Okay. I don't think it's anything that they saw or didn't see. I think it was
for the good, though. I'm saying they saw for the good that, oh, hey, you're not going to be on the big league club, but this is your path there is to go down and work on this.
I think they knew coming into spring that it was going to look like this for him. Like, I don't think that they saw anything where they thought that changed their mind in a negative way. I think they thought, get him a little bit of opportunity, but more than anything, expose him to all of this because he hadn't really had that opportunity to go into a big league camp as somebody kind of on the cusp and see what it looks like for Sonny Gray to prepare, see what it looks like for Sonny Gray to throw a bullpen. Like the way that it was described, and John Denton tweeted about it, quotes from Oliver Marmol, basically his exit interview of, hey, you're being sent to minors camp. But the feedback they were getting from him to say, yeah, I really learned a lot about what it looks like. And like, I think it unlocked another gear for him. And every player has to go through this because you can't know until you know. And I think he at least got his first glimpse of, okay, here are some things I'm going to add when I play catch. Here's how I prepare for that. Here's how I mentally categorize all of these elements of my week. Not just, hey, here's the scouting report on the team you're about to face. Like, it's a lot deeper than that at the big league level. And this was his first time to get a chance to like feel his way through that. And they saw that.
And I kind of look at it as a case of you're starting to see the starters going 3 innings, and you're going to see that extended from there. So for somebody like a Quinn Mathews, okay, hey, they see him as that starter. Go down, we're going to start stretching out, get you 5, 6, and that way
stretch out too, just not in games.
And that's what I'm saying. You're getting him out of the game element of it. You're getting him to throw more pitches on a consistent basis. So maybe they're looking at it and saying, mid-April, something does happen, because right now, I mean, it's, Steven Matz is still healthy. Everybody else is still healthy. We haven't seen, last year though, we saw the Cardinals didn't start off with the rotation they wanted to at the start of the season last year.
You always luse somebody,
so
it seems like.
You want him to just be ready if needed. So it's that, the glass, break glass if needed. Okay, hey, you're going to be stretched out and you're going to be ready to go if that's the case.
And he's also not the first guy in that grouping, which I think is important, because right now, let's talk about some of the guys that they've said, no, we want you in camp to see this. Like, it's very interesting to me that Roby is on that list relative to Quinn Mathews. But he's also been around longer. He's had more professional experience, even though Quinn might even be older, but he was just recently drafted. And last year was his first professional pitch at low A when Quinn Mathews began. So Roby has been around longer, had more of an injury track to where he's not like, I don't think if you told the Cardinals, like, you can have both Roby and Quinn start 30 games this year, they're gonna be like, well, with Roby, we're probably going to have to cut that off at some point because he's going to have to not jump from, 50 innings to 150 in one summer. Like, that's going to have to be managed. Whereas with Quinn, he threw 120 something innings, and it's like he can probably ramp up from there and be pretty close to a full-time workload. But the readiness is a factor that he's going to have to see play out as he gets a little bit more experience. But let's talk about, okay, Roby is one, but Gordon Graceffo is still in camp. Liberatore is obviously still in camp, but still as a starter, they're going to pare that down eventually. Graceffo, his best chance to make this team is if the Cardinals say you're in the bullpen day one, And that would probably be something that Graceffo is okay with because it means he's on the St. Louis Cardinals. But what if they say, gosh, he looks really good in a stretched out form. We're going to send him to Memphis, and he's actually like first up. So even ahead of Quinn, but then the Memphis season will start, and you can see who's actually performing better and make those decisions. But it could play to Quinn's benefit if a Graceffo and a Libby are on the opening day bullpen.
I was going to say, what would be... there is not a scenario, I guess, I see where Liberatore starts the season in Memphis, because that is he was such a weapon out of the bullpen last year that even if he doesn't earn that starting spot,
right,
you still want him in St. Louis ready to go.
Probably so. But what happens? Let me paint you a picture. Steven Matz, they're going to move him to the pen for McGreevy because nobody gets hurt. Okay, so now that's another lefty in your bullpen. You've got John King in your bullpen as a lefty. You've got Jojo Romero. Matz is the third lefty in your bullpen, and you love that Libby is finally attacking for 5 innings at a time, and he's actually the next man up. Or maybe he vaults over McGreevy, and McGreevy goes to Memphis, and Libby's in Matz's spot. Like, I'm not saying that's likely, but that would probably be the scenario that you would paint to say, dude, Libby's finally putting it together. We've just got a lot of healthy pitchers right now, so let's let him go to Memphis for a couple starts. I don't think that happens, though. You've
looked at it more recently than I have, as somebody jumps into the chats and asks does Liberatore have options?
I think he does.
Okay, so I just that was one.
I can find that out as we're going, though.
If in that scenario that you paint, if all of that happens and they decide McGreevy needs to be in the rotation, Matz is healthy, we have all these other lefties.
Yeah.
I think before sending Liberatore down to Memphis,
he does have one.
I think before sending Liberatore down to Memphis, I think the more likely option would be we're going to figure out a way to get Steven Matz off the roster type, trade him type thing.
And like the Eric Fetty rumors, I know that Derek Gould reported like there's some openness to that. I think that gets a lot more crystallized 2 weeks from now when you're closer, and it's like, are we still healthy in the rotation? Okay. Is there any interest in Fetty or from somewhere else, Matz?
You're just waiting for pitchers to go down all throughout baseball. Jose Quintana signs a 1-year deal with the Brewers today, so you're going to see a little bit of him this year in Milwaukee.
Do that if you're willing, if you're actually getting a prospect for Fetty. Yeah. Don't just trade Fetty because you're trying to fit McGreevy into the rotation. Right. I don't think you need to do that. Let a month play out or 3 weeks of April play out. Are you still completely healthy? Great. Is one of your starters on a 1-year deal bad and overpaid, and you're like, hey, maybe it's time to...
Matz is in the last year of his deal, too.
Matz is, and Miles Michaelis is. Now, I don't think they're going to kick Michaelis to the curb April 30th, but June 1st, if he's struggling. And, like, I'm not predicting Michaelis to struggle, but I think these are some of the questions that they would have to at least entertain if, in fact, you've got all of these guys knocking on the door at the same time in Memphis.
Trying to think over the weekend injuries around... that we saw around baseball camps.
I have no idea.
Outside of, that none of them seem to affect the Cardinals. Giancarlo Stanton.
Right, that's a big one.
Yeah, he's going to start the season on injured list. And then Sean Murphy also starting the season on IL with broken ribs. They're saying 4 to 6 weeks for him. So, but again, those are moves where I think you kind of look around baseball and you think like, okay, what is there an injury that's going to spark, reignite Arenado trade rumors, and neither one of those does it. Maybe the Yankees want an extra bat. I don't know, but I don't think that's going to be the one that pushes that over the top for them to rush and trade for Arenado. And that doesn't affect the Braves at all either with Murphy going down. So those are the ones. That's kind of what I'm looking at when I'm looking at those injuries reports around baseball, to where what injury is it going to be that's going to tip it to where the Cardinals play a factor in those injuries?
When you have those injuries on your team, unless you're like a World Series or bust type of organization in 25,
which those two teams I think look at. Yeah, but again,
on the pitching side, let's say they had that and they don't have a number 6 that they feel good about. I'd have to look at each of those depth charts to know, because on the pitching side, I think it's more interesting. The Arenado thing, I don't think it's
I think the Yankees did shut down a pitcher this weekend, didn't they?
Yeah, they might have lost somebody.
Was it Gill?
I don't remember who it might have been, but let's just say for the sake of argument that a team has that. Aren't they signing the next Jose Quintana to a low risk thing than trading a prospect to the Cardinals for Fetty? Like you'd rather spend money right now than prospect capital as you get into the season and you can start to envision what some of these guys look like in your AAA, and then they're on the cusp and you're excited about them as prospects. You don't want to trade for Fetty right now. And if you do it, it's because the Cardinals are willing to do it just to get rid of some money. And I just don't think that makes sense. You traded for Fetty because you wanted him to be part of your team in 25. Yes, last year he could help you down the stretch when you knew Lynn was going to need to go on the shelf. But you wanted Fetty for now because you knew that you were going to have to decrease payroll and that Fetty wasn't really making that much, 7.5. So keep him and let's get through April, May and kind of see where you're at. Are all of these prospects that look so shiny right now, are they performing in Memphis? Is your rotation healthy? Then you can start to think about trading from depth. But let's let the Cardinals have a chance to win 82, 85 games and be in the mix because that's what they want to do, even if they're not like spending as though that's the priority.
Well, Luis Gil undergo an MRI due to the shoulder troubles.
Yeah, so that's
for him. So that is one of the injuries, another one of the injuries that happened over the weekend. So that is that's.
It's something. Again, it's something to monitor. But
yeah, as you look through. Hey, this is Cards Hub 365, powered by our friends over at Gray Bar. If you're still suffering from supply chain issues and they're disrupting your operations, have no fear. Gray Bar has you covered, and you can rely on their nationwide logistics network to get what you need, where you need, when they need to get there, and all within budget. Gray Bar, a trusted and leading North American distributor of electrical, communications, data, networking, and industrial products. Gray Bar literally supports products of any industry, construction, hospitals, industrial plants, schooling. It doesn't matter. Just one clear mission: to serve as that vital link in the supply chain, adding value for customers and suppliers with innovative solutions and services. Here's what you need to do. Visit graybar.com to start an order today. That's graybar.com and fix those supply chain issues with Gray Bar, your distributor for electrical and datacom needs. So as we welcome you to your questions into the YouTube chat here on Cards Hub 365 on Sports Hub STL, you filled in for Randy Carricker this morning.
I did.
With Brooke Grimsley. It was the Randy Carricker Show featuring Brooke Grimsley, hosted by Brendan Schaeffer.
Kind of fun, right?
Yeah. You guys had Klebs on, our boss. And he had some interesting comments on Victor Scott II.
Yeah, he kind of thought Victor Scott maybe has a way into this team potentially, which is something we'll be talking about for sure.
Which I would guess, I mean, if Victor Scott II is making this team, does that mean Siani is the one that ends up in Memphis to start?
That would surprise me because I think he's got such a value even as a fourth outfielder because of the things you can do.
But wouldn't Victor Scott be the fourth outfielder then?
No, Victor Scott's making this team if he's playing every day.
Okay.
I don't really know where.
I guess as I'm just kind of looking, I guess the more and more I look, I mean, I have Brendan Donovan in as an outfielder at this moment. I have Brendan Donovan as
which
an outfielder.
Which means you have Lars Newt Bar, excuse me.
Yes.
Newt Beer. That was kind of the reason Newt Bar and
Cardinals will start selling it. You give them that idea, they'll start selling it.
There you go. Yeah. They had the Newt Bar, but they need a Newt Beer. Anyway,
they could slap his face on something. They're going to do it, and they're going to sell it, and it'll sell out. I can hardly
blame them for that. Okay, so you think Lars Nootbaar is going to be the center fielder, and that Donovan's going to be in left, and that Gorman's going to be at second, and that Burleson's going to be at DH against right-handed pitching? Is that all?
Yes.
Accurate. Okay.
Yes. And Nolan Arenado is your third baseman. Yes, but he is not traded.
Is Ivan Herrera your catcher too? Just go sell out for offense. Defense be damned.
We haven't worked enough in our years of knowing each other for you to know that I will always sell out for offense at any, I don't care if you bring your glove to the ballpark and you can hit, I'll find somewhere for you to go play. Yeah.
And that might be the way that the Cardinals do it. And again, there was a quote in the Ken Rosenthal article recently kind of talking about the Cardinals situation where John Mozeliak said, hey, we're asking all these questions of like, are we going to be good or not this year? And one of those questions was, can Brendan Donovan be an all-star left fielder? And I thought that was interesting because clearly the front office is kind of the mind that maybe you do sell out for offense this year instead of defense. But what about this? What if Gorman is struggling offensively? And you're like, is that actually how we sell out for offense to have Gorman in the line? Like there's so many different questions that you could try to arrange.
And that would be, and that's the thing. If Gorman struggles at the plate, then I think we talked about this on Saturday is he come off the bench or do you start him in Memphis?
Right.
And hope he figures it out down there, or do you just give him 2-3 starts a week in St. Louis and see if he just picks it up along the way and then you just ride some hot streaks with him? So then Donovan moves to second and everything else gets a little clearer. Yes.
Here's what I'll say. Your idea of Donovan's a left fielder and Newbar's a center fielder doesn't happen if Victor makes the team, because the reason that you do that is to try to sell up for more offense. What if Victor Scott is your more offense and your defense? Because Siani at this point is kind of struggling a little bit at the plate. I still think he's a very, very good defender, and I'd like to think that he has more in there offensively. But at a certain point, you kind of are what you've shown you are. Victor Scott has that perception of he hasn't yet shown us his best offensively because he's still a young player on the climb. So if you have the best of both worlds, which is his athleticism and speed in center field defensively, and growing as a defender every day because he's just getting more acclimated to the major league speed of the ball off the bat and all of those things. And he's actually a guy who's taking advantage, putting the ball in play, using his speed to his benefit at the plate. He's your center fielder, Newt's in left. And you basically do the Siani in center alignment with Victor. That's the way that Victor makes the team. He does not make the team as a fourth
Donovan.
outfielder.
Yeah, Donovan at second, and then
figure out Gorman, Burleson, DH, and that's the question for sure of how they want to approach that. But that's honestly the ideal version of what happens, because Victor's got the high ceiling offensively and defensively to be able to plug in and fit everything else where it goes. The question is, what does he have to do to make that the decision if the Cardinals are already leaning one way or another with center field? I think do what he's doing and maybe just continue to show consistency. Don't have a big lull in his spring training where he's not performing, because I think if Siani doesn't take the job and run with it, he was the incumbent, but I also think Victor, they can see the vision of how everything
he was the guy they gave the shot to last year to start the year.
Yeah. He learned from that, I think, too. He didn't perform at the plate, but I think he's going to be a lot better this time around. And I think they're going to be willing to consider Victor Scott in that role 100%, because I think Ollie prefers to have that sterling defense in center. So if you can give him an option that's both offensive and defensive, and that's Victor Scott, I think that there's going to be a lot of synergy with what the front office wants and what the field staff wants to put out there on the lineup every day. And that might be Victor Scott if he continues to perform.
As you mama points out, if you hit, you don't sit. That's my theory when it comes to that. Redbird Farmhands, if Scott makes it, is Burley out, is what they assume. I would say no. I think, as you just pointed out, it's Siani, I think, would be the first one to head down to Memphis if that's the case.
So, and I actually disagreed with that too. I think it's Luke and Baker that might be out, because that would be like, who's your bench right now? If it's Siani in center, Newbar in left, your bench is probably Burleson on paper, but he'll still play a decent amount. The backup catcher, whether it's Pajes or Herrera, I still kind of slot Hellman into that backup shortstop utility play everywhere kind of role.
Yeah.
And then you've got
Fermin.
And then you've got one more. Well, Fermin could be that Hellman role. I think they're in competition. And then ostensibly Luke and Baker as a righty bat off your bench. But if
he's the only one you'd have that. I mean, he'd be the.
So you'd either have that or you wouldn't have that, right? Like maybe Siani would be in AAA. I just think maybe it's a case where, because they don't really have a backup shortstop if you don't have that Hellman/Fermin role on your bench. They don't have one, which is
162 for Mason Wynn.
Do you know offhand?
Yeah.
How many games did Mason Wynn appear in last year, if you had to guess?
I would say.
Because remember, the back was the issue, and so they were giving him some off days and kind of.
They didn't give him many. I mean, it didn't seem like they gave him less off days than I think they would have planned. But I want to say 148,
150. That's so you're telling me he's going to play a bunch more this year than 150 for all the talk that we had about.
We haven't heard anything about the back.
No, my point is he's going to, but that should make that backup role kind of irrelevant.
Yes,
which is almost why. And I asked about it, and I was kind of shut down that this wasn't the direction they were going to go. But I was like, hey, do you think Brendan Donovan's going to play some shortstop in
spring? If he has to play shortstop 5 times a year, 5 times on the season, that's okay.
I think you're a better team if you're willing to do that and have a bench that's like Siani, backup catcher, Luke and Baker, and find something else of value. I might be forgetting. Burleson was the one that. So my point was have no middle infielder on your bench, but they can't do that. They're going to have somebody that can back up at those spots, and so it's probably Hellman or Fermin. Not to JC, by the way, because he needs to play every day. It's not going to be Thomas JC.
If you only need it for 5 games, I mean, screw it. Put Gorman there, put Burleson there. I mean, put Wilson Contreras at shortstop.
That's
just for 5 games. I just say whoever's hitting, put the offense, whatever makes your best offense for that day.
Really a good
go
point.
for it.
They don't need. You could make a case that they don't need
Siani at short,
the Hellman role. They could have Gorman because I said you needed an infielder on your bench.
Yeah,
you actually don't, because Gorman is that. If he's your DH, like, he also can play second while Donovan plays short on those days. They won't do it that way. That's really threading a needle, but that's what I would probably do. And I would have Siani as my 4th outfielder, and I would have Baker off the bench, because I think that Baker at bat late in a game with all these lefties that you also have, you might want to have that righty to come in off the bench. So I don't know. I think it's Siani versus Baker, though, for a spot, if that's the way that it's going to be.
You want to talk Memphis infield, because somebody on the chat, Bill Downtown, already threw out his starting 4 in that Memphis infield too.
Yeah, he's a big Weatherholt guy. Weatherholt's not going to be in Memphis to start the season, but it's nice. And by the way, Koperniak is not an infielder. Oh, he was also talking about Koperniak and Scott maybe being in the outfield. I don't know.
Yeah,
Weatherholt's going to probably start at Peoria or Springfield. And if he plays well, he'll get called up from there and continue to rise up, just like Quinn Mathews did.
Multiple people also throwing in there that Nolan Arenado could play short. So that's multiple people just throwing that out there. Again, if it's 5 games out of the season, you're doing it you want the best offense out there. I don't care who's playing short those games. And
I think that's probably, and Donovan could do it. But that's why I was hoping to hear Ollie say, yeah, we'll throw him in at shortstop during spring. And he kind of didn't seem like that was going to be part of the plan, unless they just got bored. I don't know.
Next time I do a show with Clay, I'm gonna throw that out there. I'm just gonna throw the Burleson Siani at short.
Nothing on Hellman. Nothing on Hellman, so, but I think that would be your best
just
alignment.
To get that reaction out of him.
Yeah,
that'll be.
Ask him about Takoa Roby too. He likes to talk.
I'll wait. I think you're with him on Wednesday, so I think you can hit the.
I'll start the show. I'll start the show, and I'll be like, "So, Claves, we have to spend an hour on Takoa Roby today," which is like kind of funny.
Yes, also tell him that you're doing an hour too.
He'll enjoy that.
Multiple, yes, just multiple. You keep coming in there with the Arenado at short stuff. We need a T-shirt here at the Hub for our merch sales. So I think that's a good one to start with.
Start it off. Get it printed up.
Absolutely. I think that's going to do it for us today, though. Here on Cards Hub 365, powered by Gray Bar. Tomorrow, another edition of it, because we go 365 days a year here on Cards Hub 365. It's right there in the name. We can't miss a day, so we will be back here with you tomorrow afternoon. Cardinals get back in action. Is it Split Squad tomorrow or Split Squad Wednesday? Tomorrow, Split Squad.
You have to choose. I think actually both games televised. I saw on Cardinals.com it was ESPN and the FanDuel. So
I was wondering if they're going to do a red zone type of thing.
I don't think so. You pick between, do you want to watch Palante or McGreevy? I think is how you determine which game you're going to watch.
Palante.
You think he's going to lose that battle?
Yes.
In terms of people watching,
oh my God, okay. Cardinal fans, they want to see those prospects. We've seen Andre Palante for the last 3-4 years now.
I'll be watching Palante. How about that? Actually, I have 2 TVs in my basement. I'll probably watch both. There you go.
So if they're not, if FanDuel's not going to do a red zone channel with the cat running it, jumping back and forth from game to game.
He should have to drive from one stadium to the other. That would be good.
That would be good. But no, I want to see McGreevy again, just try to solidify his spot in that opening day rotation and make things difficult on the Cardinals.
Okay, I think that's a great idea. I hope you have fun.
That's going to do it for us today here on Cards Hub 365. He is Brendan Schaeffer. I'm Joe Roderick. We'll talk to you next time right here on Sports Hub STL.